Kari Lake is currently the frontrunner in the GOP primary for Senate in the state of Arizona. And as of right now, she's polling 6 points down to her Democratic opponent, Ruben Gallego. Now, it's only April, so these polls could get a little better or a little worse for her. But either way, I think regardless of what the polls say about this race, at the end of the day, even if Donald Trump were to carry the state of Arizona, I think Kari Lake would still be certain to lose this race. We're going to talk about the several reasons why I think Kari Lake is not going to win in Arizona. And by nominating her, the GOP has essentially given this race up to the Democrats. So we're going to talk about what all those reasons are in just a second. But first, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing down below and liking this video if you enjoy. So making predictions in April of an election year is a pretty bold thing in and of itself. But making a near certain prediction that Kari Lake is certainly going to lose, I think is another thing entirely, and it's not something I do very lightly, but after a few months of seeing how Kari Lake's been running her campaign and how she's effectively made no effort to change her messaging from the 2022 election, I think she's certainly going to lose to Ruben Gallego. Now, the first reason I'll say already is that Arizona over the past couple of years has become difficult terrain for Republicans since they continue to bleed out support in suburban Phoenix. You know, if we take a look at 2018, for instance, you had Kyrsten Sinema beat Martha McSally by 2.5 points about. And the reason she won was because she won Maricopa County, home to Phoenix, by over 4 percentage points. And that basically sealed the state in the Democrats' direction. Fast forward to 2020, Republicans make some gains in Maricopa County, but it's still not enough. Democrats get over 50%. They beat Donald Trump here by 2.2%. And that overall comes out to a margin of 0.3 for Joe Biden. Incredibly close, very narrow victory, but a victory nonetheless. And then if we fast forward to 2022, Republicans continue to lose ground in Maricopa County. Kari Lake, funny enough, gains a little bit in Maricopa County, but the overall margin of around 2 points in favor of the Democrat is essentially the same as it was in 2020, and Republicans still lose. Now, they did win a couple of statewide races here, but they were more down ballot. Treasurer, for example, the incumbent Republican treasurer, was reelected there by 12 points. Had the superintendent of public instruction, which was actually a GOP pickup, mine inspector, which was uncontested. And then, of course, you had Secretary of State, which was an open race in which Republicans ran this sort of stop the steal lunatic. And he ended up losing pretty decisively in this election, only getting 46% of the vote in Maricopa County compared to Kari Lake's 49 or Donald Trump's 48. So Republicans haven't been helping themselves by running people that Arizona voters time and time again reject because they don't support their messaging, which is basically nonstop Trump cheerleading. Now, Arizona doesn't necessarily reject all Republicans or even conservative Republicans, but this sort of Trumpian divisive style from a lot of these candidates, and especially the stop the steal talk, is incredibly toxic to educated suburban voters in places like Phoenix, Tucson, etc. And that's why Republicans have been losing the state of Arizona. You know, demographics is another issue entirely, but this is something that is preventable in the short term. Republicans can still win statewide in Arizona if they run electable candidates that actually focus on issues people in Arizona care about, not still talking about 2020 or having just completely untenable positions on issues like abortion, which is really a non-starter in suburban America. So that's one thing in and of itself, but Republicans can still overcome Arizona's demographical issue, and we've just pointed it out before. Kimberly Yee, for instance, who's the incumbent treasurer, getting 55% of the vote in Maricopa County. Now, Mark Fincham, the election denier guy who ran for Secretary of State, he got only 46%. Kimberly Yee got 830,000 votes in this county. So this is an urban suburban county, and yet you have a conservative Republican. Granted, it's a lower level race that people don't really pay attention to, but she ends up winning here by 11 points. So there's absolutely no excuse as to why Republicans can't win the state of Arizona. Pima County only losing by 11 points. Donald Trump lost Pima County by over 20. So there are Republicans that can win in Arizona. They're just not the type of Republicans that the party is putting forward for major office. Now, a second reason why Kari Lake is going to lose is because she's completely tied to the hip to Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump could theoretically carry Arizona, and Kari Lake would still lose. And the main reason that is because voters want to vote for the real thing, the real brand, the real MAGA brand, as opposed to whatever Kari Lake is selling, which is basically just a copy of it and a slightly worse version of it. Kari Lake is basically a Trump sycophant. You know, she says everything Donald Trump wants to hear. She says everything MAGA wants to hear. And yet she's still going to be, I think, a more difficult sell to voters in Arizona than Donald Trump himself, because Donald Trump does sort of have this somewhat charming charisma that while a lot of educated suburban voters hate, you do have some people in the middle that respect him. Trump has built an image and a brand around himself. And when you have other people parroting that brand, they just look like sycophants and they seem unoriginal. And Kari Lake is certainly that. So I think you could very well see a situation where Donald Trump narrowly carries Arizona and Kari Lake would still lose because people would rather vote for the real thing than an imitation copy. So, you know, Kari Lake's whole Trump MAGA gimmick, trying to be more Trumpy than Trump, is not going to work. If anything, it's going to turn off more voters who would actually suck it up and vote for Trump, but would not vote for somebody like Kari Lake because it's just a bridge too far. In a way, she's a lot more extreme than Donald Trump when it comes to policy to your average, you know, normal voter, independent, what have you. Donald Trump at least has been president before. He's a known commodity. Kari Lake is somebody that Arizona knows and doesn't like, objectively speaking, since they decided to choose Katie Hobbs over her. And for the record, Katie Hobbs was really not that much of a campaigner. She dodged media appearances. Kari Lake was in the spotlight. She would do anything to get in front of a camera, and voters saw that, and they still didn't pick her. So that's also an indictment on how unlikable Kari Lake is to the average voter. Now, another reason why Kari Lake is going to lose is because she has not done anything to moderate her image since 2022. Now, granted, she lost a very close race. She could have conceded that election, moved on, and I think a lot of Arizona voters, potentially, if they had viewed Katie Hobbs unfavorably, maybe would have voted for Kari Lake in 2026 if Hobbs was really unpopular. But she didn't do that. Instead, she basically pulled the Trump gimmick, saying that the election was rigged against her. And granted, it was a very close election, but Kari Lake made no effort to have her supporters vote early, vote by mail, all these things that Republicans complain about. They don't like mail-in voting, but you can't change the mail-in voting situation if you don't actually vote by mail and become competitive with Democrats. So you can't win elections today anymore by just telling your supporters to vote in person. There's too much going on in the world. Not everyone's going to make it to the polls on Election Day Tuesday. And, you know, that's something Kari Lake learned the hard way. And there were long lines and whatnot in Phoenix. And, you know, she was complaining that not all of her supporters got to vote. And, you know, candidates always make allegations like that every time there's an election, that their supporters are getting turned away and whatnot. It's been around for hundreds of years. But Kari Lake made no effort to get these people to vote early. And as a result, if they miss the election, too bad, so sad. And Kari Lake loses. So I think it's a really dumb strategy by Republicans to continue parroting this anti-mail, anti-early vote messaging. You know, somebody who's utilized early voting very effectively is Glenn Youngkin in Virginia. You know, he won in 2021, utilizing early vote, and especially in 2023 and during the midterms pushed it very hard. And while Republicans didn't win all of the big races, they improved a pretty decent amount over their 2020 margins. So again, not enough to win a lot of the key elections, but getting a lot closer than Republicans otherwise would have if they continued this sort of 2020 anti-vote by mail, anti-early voting strategy. You know, Kari Lake has also been a disaster when it comes to the issue of abortion. You know, abortion is already going to be a huge anchor around the ankles of Republicans that are running around the country because it's still not a settled issue. In fact, this is honestly the best thing Democrats could ask for, because now that abortion is perpetually sort of in limbo in a lot of states, they can continue to run on it and continue to win, even if they're ignoring other key issues that people care about. Because in a lot of ways, suburban women and just moderate voters in general think that it's very extreme to be pro-life with no exceptions as a candidate for big office. So, you know, that's going to continue to hurt Republicans. And Kari Lake has been flip-flopping all over this issue. Originally, when the Supreme Court of Arizona brought back this 1864 total abortion ban, with the only exception being the life of the mother, she said it gone too far. She said that, you know, it's out of step with how a lot of Arizonans feel about abortion. And she came up with this whole video that basically struck a very sensitive tone, saying she understands that she chose life, for example, but that not every mother is going to make that choice. And there's certain economic and personal decisions that are involved. And it seemed like a very good ad. And that would have worked, I think, very well in the Phoenix area had she sort of toned down all this stolen election stuff too. But, you know, instead she comes out after that, and basically you have all these articles now from liberal media saying that she's wants sheriffs and whatnot to enforce this abortion ban. So she's been all over the place when it comes to the issues. The only thing she's really set on is that she's totally devoted to Donald Trump, would do anything for Donald Trump, and has said at multiple rallies that she basically loves Donald Trump more than her own husband. So, people just see this as creepy and unrelatable, and, that's why she's going to lose, because voters don't like her in Arizona. And, I think the Republican Party has made a really grave mistake by giving her the red carpet in this state. Steve Daines basically surrendered Arizona to Kari Lake. And as a result, this is going to be a race that Republicans aren't going to win. This is one pickup opportunity Republicans won't have. And the alternative is a very progressive Democrat, Ruben Gallego, who is to the left of John Fetterman and would certainly be probably one of the most progressive officials ever elected in the state of Arizona. And this is a state that is still historically, ancestrally a Republican state. So that goes to show you the dire state of the Republican Party in Arizona. And there's all sorts of fundraising issues there too. We could perhaps do another video about that in the future. But, Republicans aren't helping themselves by choosing Kari Lake as their candidate. Now, at the end of the day, the race could be close. But I think there's almost no way she actually wins. I mean, realistically, this is a lean to likely race, and I think it stays that way for the Democrats because you have a number of demographic factors already going against Republicans in the state. The rapid growth of Phoenix, the bluing of that area, Tucson, same thing. Not enough support in the rural counties to get Republicans over the finish line, essentially, without winning Maricopa County. If Republicans lose Maricopa County by 2 or 3 points, it's essentially game over. There's not enough rural support to get you over the top. You have that. Of course, you have the fact that Arizona Republicans and Arizona voters seem to distinguish between somebody like Kari Lake and Donald Trump versus just your run-of-the-mill, inoffensive Republican. And that fairly standard Republican ends up usually winning statewide races by a couple of points. And you have sort of the MAGA Trump-Lake Republicans end up losing by a couple of points because they do so bad here in Maricopa County, where about 70% of the state lives. So this goes to show that running a Trump-inspired campaign, trying to be more Trump than Donald Trump, trying to parrot the election nonsense more so than he does, is not going to work. And I think at the end of the day, I'm pretty confident in saying that Kari Lake is going to lose this race. And there's really not a lot Republicans can do to rehabilitate their image. Arizona voters already know who Kari Lake is. They rejected her the first time. And honestly, in 2024, they're probably going to reject her by a wider margin, even if Donald Trump somehow wins the election. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, leave a thumbs up under this video. If you disagree, leave a thumbs up under this video and tell me down in the comments why you disagree. I'd certainly like to hear your reasons. As always, again, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.